Hello, you are listening to the Gamer Librarian Podcast, the best podcast you can find on this side of the multiverse. I am your host, Adrian, and today I will be talking about The Boys Season 4 finale, the coming up finale for the My Hero Academia manga, and more. Afterwards, be sure to subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released, and show your support by liking and leaving a comment. Thank you for joining. So, here we are. Another Friday is upon us, and that means another episode from yours truly. A lot has happened this week. I live in the United States, and I'm sure all of you know this country's politics are in shambles. So, in a way to ignore that, I have, of course, been playing video games. I had my first time playing Lethal Company with some friends, and I have to say that I enjoyed the game. I stayed away from watching gameplay of it previously, and now I have a chance to experience it myself, and I had to say I had a blast. I mean, I died a lot and fast, usually within 5 minutes of landing on the planets. But learning the game's mechanics on the fly was completely enjoyable. Figuring out how to navigate the areas with your team, or even harder by yourself, is enjoyable. The roguelite element of it I found very fun for replayability. Now, we didn't get that very far that first day, but I'm dying to play it again. The first recent update added a red wolf-like enemy that can spawn camp you and drag you away from your team to your untimely demise. The enemies are dangerous and can't be ignored. I loved that. So yeah, my first few hours of Lethal Company had me dying to play again, and I will certainly try in the future. But that's more of a multiplayer team-based game, and sometimes I just like to wind down with a simple game. So I've also been slamming through Persona 3 Reload, and I'll say this, it's my favorite Persona game by far. I'm having a blast running through the dark hour, ruining shadows within one turn. And once I reach the floor blockade for that chapter, I get to focus on all the social links, which is so diverse in the game. Now, I never finished Persona 3, the original, on the PS2, and quite frankly, I don't plan on going back to it. The quality of life additions that Reload has makes this game feel like Persona 5, and that's the absolute best compliment I can give this game. I am dying to continue playing it now once this episode is published. I'm not focusing too hard on collecting or leveling personas. My main goal is getting my social link stats up so I can experience all the options in the future as they come around. Loving this game. I got the expansion, so I'm hoping to do DLC content later on in the future. And the music, holy shit, I have the TV on louder than usual because the music is so enjoyable. And I usually turn music off in games while playing. I'm in the middle of June right now, and we got Fuka to the party. This is when the real game begins because you get so many new options for combat. I'm only about 25 hours in, and I still feel like there's so much more to explore and do. This game has me so hyped for Persona 6 because it feels like Atlas has a great formula for the day-to-day gameplay, getting to choose when you want to explore Tartarus and focus on the social links you want to enjoy. Not to mention the built-in rewind system for when you aren't confident on the recent choice you just made. This game is a blast, and I hope any of you listening that either enjoys long-form RPGs or interested in playing Persona in any way, get Persona 3 Reload. It won't disappoint you if you take the time to understand the mechanics. Speaking of Persona, today it was announced that you can order real LeBlanc brand coffee from the game Persona 5. I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but I certainly think that is pretty cool. The link will be obviously in the description for that. So yeah, those are the games I've been playing this week, and I'll certainly be playing them again next week because they're pretty long form games. Now, there are a few games I want to talk about that are coming up in the future and things like that. Newly released Dungeons of Hinterberg that is out now, I believe, on Xbox Game Pass. The gameplay trailers over the past year have kept me intrigued for this game, and I'm excited to play it eventually. Unsure when I'll resub to Game Pass because right now it's not viable for me to continuously pay for the service if that's the game I want. And looking at Xbox recent track record, Dungeons of Hinterberg will probably become available on other platforms eventually. I do hope to be able to experience that game soon so I can talk about it here on the podcast. Recently, Diablo has showed off its newest expansion, Vessel of Hatred, and that does look fun, especially for the newest class, Spiritborn, that is inspired by the Witch class from the previous iterations of Diablo. A little upset that there's no Paladin yet, but maybe in expansion 2, fingers crossed for the future, because I really enjoyed the classes that I played so far in Diablo 4, but I do think that having another one with a little more variety will definitely spice up the game. I only ever did Necromancer and the Barbarian classes. I wasn't a big fan of how the seasonal model is implemented for Diablo 4, and that prevented me from going back to the game during those seasons. But I certainly will do the expansion with the new class just to see how it is. I did pay for the expansion already, so I am kind of obligated to that point. Diablo 4 is also getting a run for its money because Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 is doing everything right with being free to play and implementing their microtransactions that are transferable between games. Not to mention, the seasonal model for Path of Exile just looks far more player friendly than any live service game I've seen, even Diablo 4. Path of Exile has started its beta for PoE 2, and I'm excited to try that out. Hopefully, I get into that. So, before we get into the other topics I want to talk about, I do want to take some time to talk about our sponsor, Dubby. Dubby is a clean energy drink that is made to give you focus with no crash, jitters, or angst like other energy drinks. We also have no maltodextrin filters and don't use artificial dyes. Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, a nootropic, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. You can find them on the link below, and you can get products like drinks and powders, apparel, portable bottles, stickers, bags, and more. If you use the code GamerLibrarian, you will get 10% off your order. Again, link is in the description to go to the website Dubby and using Gamer Librarian coupon code for 10% off your order. Now, I'm a big fan of Dubby. I think their drinks are pretty good, and they always help me out when I'm needing a little extra time for just midnight gaming sessions and just plowing through those late night bosses just so I can get to sleep and finish, those games and stuff. So if you're into having drink supplements for your gaming sessions or whatever needs you, check out the link below and find something that suits you. Shout out to Dubby for giving me this opportunity to spread this great coupon code for everybody because I just want to give something out to anybody listening and supporting the podcast. And I think it's pretty cool to be part of this, culture and that kind of stuff with doing this podcast. That's basically just what I'm trying to do here. And so, yeah, thank you to Dubby for all that, getting this sponsor here. Obviously, we're going to try and get them in almost any video that I can and maybe do some giveaways in the future, but that's down the line. Now, if you've been following along for the last few episodes, I have been continuing my journey to do the entirety of the Dragon Age series, and we're still in the beginning, the early phases. I finished Dragon Age The Stolen Throne by David Gaider, and that was an extremely fun book. I really enjoyed how it kind of felt like its own small adventure within the Dragon Age universe. It didn't try to expand the lore or add anything in. It just felt very concise and complete for the tales of getting Logain and Merrick together as friends and seeing the dynamic between them. I think that's really great, and that context that it gives just I think it allows more value and enjoyment to when I get to play Dragon Age Origins. Now, there is a sequel, Dragon Age The Calling, by the same author, and this is a much more direct um introduction to Dragon Age Origins, I believe. It's definitely the beginning of the Blight and how we see the Blight kind of start to rise up. We get to see characters like the Architect, who was never introduced until I think the Dragon Age Origins DLC, which is pretty cool. We also get to see characters like Duncan, who is a very different character in this book than how he's portrayed in the first game, Dragon Age Origins. He's like a rogue this time around, and he's very like I don't know, selfish to a degree for some of the actions he's kind of done, but he's currently part of the Grey Wardens, and that's pretty cool because that's where we see him in the game Origins and we see him be much more like a knightly kind of character, far more like a leader type, from at least from what I've experienced from when I was playing Dragon Age. So it's definitely cool to see him kind of go through this different chains. Hopefully, it's pretty cool to see that in the book. I'm only about 100 pages in, so not very far. For the story, it follows the architect has kidnapped a Grey Warden who knows knowledge of where an old god is, which is basically how all these blights start. Is once the Darkspawn find an old one, they control it, and they lead a blight onto the surface world and through more of the deep worlds or the deep roads, and that's just how the story goes. And it's pretty cool to see how this begins because we never get context for the blight, especially from the architect in like the first game. We don't get full context, so I'm hoping to get a lot more information by the time the book ends. And right now, Logain is just hanging out by he's simply just back at the castle, holding the fort down, where King Merrick and the rest of the Grey Wardens go and try to save this Grey Warden from the Architect and the Darkspawn. And that's pretty much where the story is right now. They're in the deep roads trying to find him. Obviously, we know how the story ends because Dragon Age Origins becomes a thing. So if anybody's been playing those games, you already know where this goes. But I want to see where this leads up to, how this book ties into the next game, and how, specifically, more importantly, what kind of prophecy for between Logan and Merrick was foretold, because we know that he's going to betray him. We know that. That's very true. and we want to see more of what's going to happen with that. I'm very intrigued by that. So by the time we finish Dragon Age: The Calling, and hopefully by the time I finish Persona 3, something around then, we're gonna start Dragon Age Origins, and we're gonna do for the first time ever a rogue character. I never play rogues. I never liked how they played in this game specifically, in almost every kind of RPG. There's never like my kind of style, but for this game, I'm gonna be doing it. We're doing a full rogue playthrough for Origins 2 and Inquisition, and I'm super excited to talk about with you all this time on the podcast. So look for that in the future when I get to play Dragon Age Origins and talk to you about the ending for The Calling by David Gaider. So that pretty much does it for Dragon Age in its books, but there is one more kind of book comic that I want to talk about, and that's the My Hero Academia manga. I've been a super big fan of My Hero Academia since I first saw the anime. Maybe it was like 2016, 2017 when it first came out. And by the time I got caught up on season one or I think season two at the time, I was blasting through the manga. I read through the beginning of it again just to see the art and stuff, and then all the new content that wasn't adapted in the in the anime yet. And I can't believe we're here. Like we're at the ending, and this just feels to me very much like a Naruto type story, where like you get these two phases. You get like young kid Naruto and Deku as they try to introduce the world to us and they become acclimated with their new powers and their friends and all that kind of cool stuff. But then there's this shady stuff in the background because we know that the villains aren't done. Like just because Shigaraki is quote unquote over, we still have a lot of plot holes that need to be figured out. There's the origin of the superpowers. There's what kind of influence All for One had on Shigaraki and the villains as a whole. He seems to have a very big part in the background, far more than we have initially thought about, because the past for like the lore for My Hero is very fragmented. We don't get a lot between, I guess, like when powers first start and when the show starts with Deku getting his powers. There's a lot of lore and history between these older heroes and villains that we don't necessarily get to see. We just see that there were big battles between heroes and villains like All Might and All for One and the descendants of All Might previously. That's pretty much all we get. But we're not getting the full side of the story here. And that's where I think the next expansion, the next iteration of My Hero will come into play with that. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see what kind of new costume designs these characters are going to have, what kind of powers we're going to see from not only old characters, see what kind of new upgrades they're going to get, but the crazy powers for newer villains and newer allies for the characters. This to me just screams Naruto Shippuden in every aspect, and even to that same degree, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and then up to GT and Super, where we get kind of different variations of the show, but it's still the same plot, it's the same characters, but it's just definitely a different tone and a different style, and I'm loving it. So, My Hero just had its 427th chapter, and I believe the last chapter, which comes out August 5th, is going to be chapter 430. And you can bet we're going to have a full discussion when that final chapter comes out and see what kind of teases are going to happen between now and then. For this chapter, we even have an iteration of the newest freshmen coming into the UA school. So obviously, these characters will probably be introduced early on at the end of this iteration of My Hero in the later chapters, and then they'll come up later on, hopefully in the Shippuden style expansion for My Hero Academia. And that's pretty much, just about it. I'm pretty excited to see where My Hero goes with all of its endings and see all that kind of stuff. There is even the manga for My Hero Vigilantes. I've read that for a little bit. That's pretty cool all on its own. It's very much like like a friend group. It's a little bit kind of like Persona because they're all in like school and they're just fighting villains whenever they can. I'm definitely gonna finish that at some point. I really liked Vigilantes. It doesn't have like an overall story, at least from the first like 50 chapters from what I read, but it seems to be just more like these guys hanging out and trying to live their life and protect people using their powers, not being specific heroes or like sponsored heroes, licensed heroes specifically. And that's just, the world. And I want to see that. Maybe that we'll get a My Hero Vigilante anime between now and the anime ending and then the new anime or manga starting up from My Hero. I love this manga. It's one of my favorites. I'm a big superhero fan, and I think that the world dynamic that they have for the superheroes is pretty cool. The worldview that the villains have is really great. There's not a whole lot of selfish characters out there. Like, Obviously, you can have characters who just steal from themselves or, focus on themselves, but it seems like a lot of the supervillains in My Hero are just lonely and like ostracized from society because of their powers, because of how their powers work and how that makes them behave. And that's pretty terrible considering the glorification that you have for the heroes in the story. Because if you have superpowers, it's okay to have them, but you're only really, heroified or seen as like a celebrity or seen as a good person if you're using those powers for good. And sometimes your powers, they can't be used for specifically good, like Toga's power, where you steal blood and become them, or maybe a power that's more detrimental to you, like the cloning dude's power that like dissolves his psyche and splits his personality, and he loses who he is. I think that's really great, and these are some really great villains in my opinion. So I'm super excited to see where these villains come from and go into the new iteration of My Hero. And of course, not just My Hero, but I am on One Piece, Wild Strawberry, and as soon as it comes back, we will be talking about Dragon Ball Super, hopefully, and Berserk and Black Clover when those mangas get their news chapters. And it's just a great time to be a manga fan because these are some of the greatest stories I've ever experienced. And I love getting to experience them with you all, chapter by chapter, when they release and talking about them. This is just so fun. And to get on the superhero way for a little bit, we have also finished The Boys Season 4 finale. And what a wild ride that was. Now, I will say season 4 was kind of a letdown because it was a lot of the same rehashed story plots that we've seen. It was the group of the boys, kind of kicking out Butcher for various reasons. This time he's sick, but it's Butcher. Of course he's going to come back and do some heinous shit, and he does. Now, him taking V and having his massive tumor become, pretty much a big supervillain now. That's he's a supervillain now, by all intents and purposes. He flat out killed the head blow up girl, which is crazy, and we don't even know where her daughter is. She's in a home now. She's in the very same home that her mom didn't want her to go to. So that's really depressing. And the state that the boys are in, I mean, practically all of them are arrested, supposedly. So we don't know what that's going to happen. What's going to happen with that? We also have the Vought kids, the two individuals who are like still, I guess, under Vought, the mind control girl, and then what's his face at the end of our episode, brainwashing Frenchie and holding down Kimiko, and we don't know what's going to happen with any of these characters. So the beginning of season 5 will be truly wild because now we have Homelander, who is essentially the president of the United States. For all intents and purposes, he is the president, the person who is president. He's just a puppet. He's a legitimate puppet. It's Homelander who is making the shots. Soups control America and essentially the world for this point on, and that's a crazy thing to think about. And I don't know what's going to happen. I like The Boys. It's obviously very much inspired by recent political events and things like that. So, if you're, kind of not wanting to be into it for that. I'm into it for the superhero stuff. The parodies of the superhero storylines and the dynamics that they have is so great. I think it's a truly great like paradigm between the boys and My Hero because you have these heroes that are glorified as celebrities and treated as celebrities. But obviously in My Hero they're like licensed police officers to a degree and there's much more of like a job function and they still have the idea of doing movies and like promotions, and that's obviously a thing in My Hero. But for the boys, it's a far more selfish and gory and mature kind of aspect for that. So I think that these two superhero stories are great. It's a nice twist between DC and Marvel, where you don't necessarily get these specific kind of storylines overall, especially when you have characters dying and coming back again and again. Having a straight one-to-one a to Z story, beginning and end. I think that's pretty great. So I'm excited to see where these stories go. How My Heroes and the My Hero new manga ends, or in The Boys season 5, whatever happens with that. And you can guarantee that in the future, I will be reading The Boys comic book. I started it a little bit for the podcast, trying to get into that, but honestly, I was halted by the Dragon Age stuff. That is far more important to me, reading the Dragon Age material and getting all that done. So for the future, we're gonna be looking for The Boys season 5 whenever that eventually drops. Sometime between then, I'll probably read the comics, and that's practically all I had to say for this episode of the podcast. I'm still gearing up to watch House of the Dragon season two, and we watched South Park: The End of Obesity. That was kind of okay. I didn't really mind that. Karate Kid season six did drop, and I'm going to be binging all the show with my girlfriend, and we're going to be watching that. I'm so excited to see how that glorious show like just has a finale. I want to know what it does, and I hope it doesn't end. I just want to see more kids having shitty street fights in schools and school drama with karate and these parents. It's just so great. And so, yeah, we're about the end of the episode, I believe. And a few things I just want to say is since today's Friday, if anybody have not seen the movie series, you should go watch the Friday trilogy featuring Ice Cube and Chris Tucker is in specifically the first movie, and those are some great times. One of the funnest movies I've ever had watched, and I watched them recently again a few days ago while we were sick, and that was really fun. So give Friday a watch if you guys haven't watched those. Those are really fun. And unfortunately, I have some unexpected medical expenses that will be coming up over the next few months. I have to get dental work done, and it's going to be costing about a little north of $10,000. So in the future, I'm going to be publishing a GoFundMe, which will hopefully help with some of the expenses. I don't expect anybody to donate or anything, but any help would be appreciated because, money is a city object in this world and we need that to survive. So, in the future, be on the look for that. Next episode, I'll probably feature that and talk about it a little more in depth. So, that's basically about it for the end of the episode. In the future, we'll be talking more about Persona 3 and the calling with Dragon Age and hopefully starting Dragon Age Origins. And yeah, that's basically about it. Everybody, please stay safe out there, do what you can to be a kind person and just try to live day to day, you know, trying to put a smile on someone else's face. That's all I really got to say. All of you take care. This has been episode 42 of the Gamer Librarian podcast. Be sure to subscribe for updates on future episode releases. Leave a like and comment on what games or books I should talk about in the future. Thank you and see you next time.